Freezing in here. So I want to get maintenance to check the heater. It's on? It can't be working. God. Everything in here is frozen. Seriously, guys, be careful. I think the floor is even frozen. I mean, honestly, it looks like ice. What? Ow! My hole! Ow, my hole! What? Ow! Hello, everybody, and welcome to the March 2021 edition of the Game Show Canada. I am a very sore, in more ways than one, host, Marc Power. And that little action you just saw happened earlier today. And I wanted to leave it as a public service reminder to all of you and to my crew who have been told several times, do not leave your Timbits on the floor. People can slip on them, and it's very dangerous. So practice Timbit safety. Anyway, moving right along, this is March of 2021, and we're going to be looking at another game show classic from north of the border. And what we're looking at this month was actually a revival of an American show, and it's one of my favorite quizzers of all time. It's just a shame that only a handful of episodes still exist of the original, because it was truly a terrific show that's largely been forgotten about. And in my opinion, it was Tom Kennedy's best work. So, without further ado, let's talk about Split Second.
Split Second was created by Stephen Haydes' Monty Hall Productions and originally ran on ABC Daytime from 1972 to 1975 for a little over 3 years. The host of the show was the late great Tom Kennedy, and the announcer was another game show legend in the late great Jack Clark. In my opinion, this was Tom Kennedy's best work of his career, and it's even more impressive given that this was his first true quizzer. So he was essentially out of his element, and Split Second was a far cry from the usual celebrity-based shows that he did to that point. Split Second is essentially a gimmick quizzer. 3 contestants play. A series of questions with 3 answers are asked, with the contestants often being asked to look at the board and pick an item for which they have to answer the question, and each contestant may offer only one answer. In round 1, if all 3 answer correctly, then they each win $5. If 2 answer correctly, then those 2 each win $10. But if only one person gets it right, then they win $25. And later in the run, the first singleton in each round also won a bonus prize. The show gets its name, Split Second, from the fact that buzzing in gives you the advantage of picking either answer, while a later buzz may force you to change on the fly if one of your opponents takes the one you were thinking of. And contestants have only 3 seconds to answer, and the judges were strict about that. Round 2, the dollar values are increased to 10, 25, and 50 respectively, and then the game concludes with the countdown round. In the countdown round, the players compete in a handicap race. The player in the lead needs only 3 correct answers to win the game, the player in second needs 4, and the player in third needs 5. But players can now give 1, 2, or all 3 answers to each question. Each answer counts the contestant's score down by 1, with the first to 0 claiming the championship, and the right to play the bonus game for a new car and a cash jackpot. And all 3 players got to keep the money they added up regardless of the outcome of the game. The biggest issue of Split Second for me was they never had a good bonus round. And by that I mean, if you're going to have a serious quizzer followed up by a game that's pure luck, that really creates a disconnect. During this era, the contestant was given a key and would choose from one of the 5 cars on stage, which incidentally were always Pontiacs. They would then take the key and try it in the ignition. If the car started, they won the car and the cash jackpot that increased by $200 every time the car was not won. This was later bumped up to a $1,000 initial prize, with $500 added every day the car was not won. If they chose the wrong car, they would come back on the next show and choose from the remaining 4 cars with the same key, if they won again. This would continue until they either won the car, with a wrong choice being eliminated each time, or they won 5 games in a row, at which point they automatically won the cash jackpot and whichever one of the 5 cars they wanted. Ultimately, despite the disconnect with the main game and the bonus round, this is still a very engaging game that deserves a longer run. And unfortunately, only a handful of episodes still exist on tape, thanks to the wiping practices of the major networks at the time. And I should also note the finale episode was particularly memorable. The show's final champion, aspiring TV writer Steve Robinson, won the game with $260, but failed to win a Pontiac station wagon and a $1,000 cash jackpot. So Tom revealed the show's backup plan. The $1,000 cash jackpot was split between the 2 losing contestants, future CNN journalist Judd Rose and housewife Martha McCarty, and Steve got to keep the station wagon anyway. So that was a very nice way to wrap up the show on a high note. And for many years, it looked like that would be Split Second's swan song. But in 1986, Monty Hall decided to revive the format.
Why does a Mexican jumping bean jump? You'll find out when one of these 3 contestants wins the chance to drive home in this brand new Pontiac 6000 STE in just a split second. And now, here's the star of our show, Monty Hall.
Thank you very much and welcome to Split Second. We asked you a little question at the top of the show. A Mexican jumping bean jumps because there's a little caterpillar living inside. That's true. And when it moves, its house moves. That's right. And when my kids are home for the holidays, you should see my house move. And they're not exactly caterpillars. Well,
the new Split Second was originally taped in Toronto and later moved to Hamilton, and all total ran for 1 season across the global networks and in U.S. syndication. This time Monty Hall would host himself, and that was likely due to CanCon regulations. And Toronto-based radio personality Sandy Hoyt served as the announcer, reuniting the duo after the disastrous The Joke's on Us, which incidentally I reviewed on the premiere episode of the Games of Canada. Monty does alright as host, but he seems a little out of his element here with the serious quizzer, since he's better suited for more lighthearted fare like Let's Make a Deal and Beat the Clock. The gameplay pretty much remained the same, but the payouts were increased to 10, 25, and 50 in the first round, and 20, 50, and 100 in the second round. And there was no bonus prize ever offered for a singleton. The show's material was a bit watered down here compared to the original, and the pace was a tad slower. The biggest change for me to the gameplay was that Monty served as an onstage judge in addition to host. And unlike original judge Bob Saenz, who was notoriously strict, Monty was relatively loose by comparison, and in my opinion, too loose sometimes. That really hurt the show. The countdown round like before would decide who would become the champion and play for the car, but the targets were now 4, 5, and 6 respectively. I will say I like this because it guaranteed there'd be at least 2 questions, and it extended the countdown round, making things a little more exciting. The bonus round had the same idea, but it got a slight tweak, mainly because the John Davidson hosted era of Hollywood Squares had just debuted, and pretty much used the exact same bonus round as the original split second. I'm surprised Monty Hall didn't try to sue for that. The contestant, instead of having a key, would now choose from one of 5 screens. Behind 4 of them was a prize. Behind the other one was the word car. If the contestant found the car, it was theirs, with no cash jackpot being offered this time. Otherwise, they would get the prize, that screen would be blacked out when it came back to the bonus round of the next show, assuming they won. And if a contestant managed to win 5 games in a row, they automatically won the car. And unfortunately, under this format, the show was giving away way too many cars, and they were going over budget. So, the bonus game had to be tweaked about halfway through the run. Now the contestant would choose 3 screens. Behind 3 of the screens was the word car, and behind the other 2 was a prize. If all 3 said the word car, then the car was theirs, and they retired. If they picked one screen with the prize behind it, then the contestant would face a dilemma. They can either take the prize and a cash offer that started at $1,000 and grew by $1,000 every time they returned to the bonus round, or they could turn it down to come back and play again on the next show. After a 4th win, the bonus round would feature 4 screens saying the word car, making things a little bit easier for the contestant. And 5 wins would automatically win the car. The show was taped in Canada. As a result, it created a bit of an oddity. On the Canadian broadcasts, all the Canadian sponsors were plugged as normal, but any mentions of a Canadian sponsor were edited out of the US broadcasts. The most glaring one being that in Canada the show was produced in association with Concept Equity Funding. Well, in the US, it was produced with Viacom, or Viacom, as announcer Sandy Hoyt pronounced it. Ultimately, this revival of Split Second just didn't have the same flow as the original, and it seems that going over budget, having given away more cars than expected, hurt it too, so it only lasted 1 year. The entire run still exists on tape, and is currently being rerun on Game TV and Buzzer. It's just too bad that this is the version that got better preserved as opposed to the original, which was way better, in my opinion. There was an attempt in 1990 to revive Split Second again, this time produced by Stu Bill at Ralph Edwards Productions, the same company behind The People's Court, and it was hosted by Rob Weller, but it didn't get past the pilot stage. And yes, I do have a copy of that pilot, but the video quality is very poor, so I can't really show any clips of that here. So that's going to do it for this edition of the Games of Canada. I will see you next month when we look back at another classic Canadian game show. Till then, this is Marc Power, saying on behalf of all of us at Game Show Gumbo, long may your big jib draw. Become a Patreon backer at www.patreon.com/GameShowGumbo or check out our website www.GameShowGumbo.com. This has been an impressive production.